The city of Duluth has condemned an apartment building which saw its third fatal fire in as many years. The fire broke out at the corner of North 7th Avenue East and 3rd Street Saturday morning. 2 people died and 2 firefighters were hurt. Today, the city of Duluth condemned the building, which means it will eventually be torn down. The cause of the latest fatal fire there is still under investigation, but the cause of the previous 2 fatal fires were ruled accidental. We've not been able to get in touch with the property manager or owner after Saturday's fire. After a